Hello. My name is Winder, and welcome back to the UBL channel. I felt like I was doing like a Disney intro. I could quickly do a silhouette of the UBL logo with my finger, I would. But I once again return to the channel, documenting my run before it goes on my own channel, because you guys actually get to see it like quicker and maybe get a bit more insight into my play. Maybe that's something that interests you. Maybe you want to see me lose. I imagine a good amount of you want to see me lose now, after winning now 4 seasons in a row. Something I am very, happy to have done, and, I don't mind giving up the title, but I'm not just gonna roll over. So, people have got to work for it. And there are some very good players in this league. So, we are making our return to the Dawn Division as the reigning champion of the division. And thank you, Java. You couldn't have done that at any other time. My PC's been on for 8 hours. So, this video will be my brief, in very large air quotes, draft analysis, instead of, going on for, like an hour. So, with this season, it is National Dex, with Terra Preview, with a couple of Pokemon that were not allowed to Terra, and by a couple I mean 3 whole tiers of Pokemon. Since we're back to points draft, that's everything above 20 points. So, because it goes up to 23. There's a lot of points for some Pokemon, and definitely made team building very difficult, or drafting even. Drafting was very, very difficult, and I know I was not alone in that. But that was the sacrifices we made in order to make sure that tiers could, points could be a bit more balanced in order to make it so that drafting as top heavy as possible wasn't optimal. So, for me going into this though, I had no idea really what I wanted to use, and I settled on kind of looking at some more lower tier Pokemon and seeing if I could get more value out of them than most others. So I'm building up from there. So as for the draft itself, like I say, I'll try and keep this brief, and by brief I mean under half an hour. So, my first pick, this is also the format we're using, Gen 9 National Dex 4v4 Terra Preview, which is why we're on the Draft League Showdown server, which is awesome. Glad we are able to do this. So, my first Pokemon of the draft is Ursaluna Blood Moon, making a return in a very different form from last season. Obviously, I used Ursaluna last season, but not Blood Moon. Blood Moon was an S+ tier last season, and this time it was dropped all the way down to 20 points, meaning it was just in the Terra range. And I think Blood Moon with Terra can be very, very dangerous. Obviously, its signature move, Blood Moon, does insane amounts of damage, and like with its classic Life Orb set, will KO most non-resisted hit Pokemon. So yeah, it immediately gives me something super, super threatening, which I really did want. I wanted some. That was some, because one of my original plans was Coco Jugulus. That was one of my original plans, but it just didn't feel offensively threatening enough. So I ended up going with Blood Moon Ursaluna, or as I'm going to attempt to refer to it as for the season, UBM, because confusing that with the move, confusing the name with the move is annoying. So I'm going to try and call it UBM for the season. Of course, it does not just have to rely on Blood Moon. UBM also has the extremely powerful Hyper Voice with, again, Terran. This thing is a threat. If you saw any form of Reg F BGC, you saw that this thing was a monster. And it is not hard to see why. It does a lot of damage, with Mind's Eye being broken because it just ignores, like, the ghost immunity. And amazing stats. The special defense really being the only kind of bad stat, and it's not super slow for Trick Room. It's a touch faster than regular Ursaluna was. But it also means it can function in Tailwind. So that is something to keep in mind as well, which is something I really like about the Pokemon. I used Base Ursaluna in Tailwind a couple times last season, I believe, or at least had the option to. I think I brought it to one game that I can recall, or potentially more. And so it can go fast if it wants to. And its HP is kind of good enough that it can afford to run speed and be fast if it wants to. So, or it can play in Trick Room, where it really does thrive. It doesn't need a lot of coverage. It has the option to have a couple pieces of coverage here and there, but the main one, honestly, is Terra Blast. Terra Blast being a special move pre-Terra just means it's an option to have, which is kind of nice. And then obviously once you Terra it, it becomes whatever type you Terra into. So this thing is going to hit like a truck, and I'm really excited to see if UBM can live up to Base Ursaluna, because Base Ursaluna impressed me a lot. So let's see if UBM can do the same. However, instead of picking up Trick Room immediately, I ended up going with a faster mode instead, and actually going with Iron Jugulus. The reason why I wanted Iron Jugulus, one, because I actually wanted to use Iron Jugulus, really, but I also wanted to make sure I had some good Tailwind. Gave me the option to have, like, a really strong Tailwind mode, which doesn't always pair the best with UBM, but gives me freedom in drafting, rather than kind of sitting on a duo and then going from there. I've got two Pokemon that can function in very different ways, and kind of opens up my draft, because I wasn't sure what I was going for initially, and where my draft would take me. So just giving myself good options to start with felt like a good idea. I've been, even though I initially wanted to use Coco plus Jugulus, Jugulus just kind of seems like a really good Pokemon. I'm sorry to Eris, who did want this, because they were going for Coco Jugulus. But I've wanted to use this Pokemon, like, in draft for a while, like a long while, like probably since like season 10. So I'm glad I finally get to use it, because it's both a support and an offensive Pokemon, which I really like. That sort of deal. I think having a Paradox Pokemon in draft is a really big buff to your draft, personally, because just the booster energy item is just, it feels broken at times. It really does. Even if you can't make the best use of it at times, just having the option to have it is really nice. Booster speed Tailwinds make it one of the fastest Tailwind setters that is in the game, pretty much excluding Prankster Tailwind and, like, Unburden setters. So it's very, very strong in that aspect. So it's not the fastest, but it's also can make up for not being the fastest by having offense. Its dual stab combination, while I hate relying on Hurricane, is really strong. Thankfully, unlike the Zapdos we had last season, this actually gets Air Slash. So, on top of that, amazing coverage, Earth Power and Heat Wave, Hydro Pump, and a big one, Meteor Beam. Power Hub Meteor Beam sets with Jugulus can be very deadly, and giving this thing a +1 attack, +1 special attack, on top of relatively good speed. It's not super fast, especially without that booster speed, but it can set its own Tailwind, which is a big deal. A super fast Taunt as well. It's generally a really solid Pokemon. And Snarl as well. Snarl was actually one of the big things I really wanted this for, just because I feel like there's going to be a lot of scary Pokemon, and having ways to shut them down with something so fast and still offensively threatening, I thought could be a good idea. Again, having this Pokemon being able to Terra means it can remove some of its weaknesses, or make some of its powerful Dark or Flying type moves even stronger. So, very excited to use Jugulus. And again, sorry to the largest of ease to for sniping this but I've been wanting to use this Pokemon for a very long time. Next up, sticking with the theme of using Pokemon I've used before, and very recently, in fact, I did in fact grab Clefable. While I don't try to do this, but it does happen where sometimes I just kind of find Pokemon that fit the bill. This notably happened in Season 11, where Bronzong just ended up fitting the bill as like one of the best Pokemon I could pick at that point. And Clefable kind of fits the bill here. Knowing that I've got Blood Moon Ursaluna, UBM even, I knew I was going to want a robust Trick Room setup. And I felt like the best way to do that was to ensure I had Follow Me, and good Follow Me at that. Because I did not want to get into a situation where I needed to get Trick Room up, but I had to rely on Rage Powder. So I felt like just going with Clefable, it did so well for me last time. I called it the MVP for me last time. For me personally, I think it was the MVP because none of the team would have functioned without Clefable. And I think it can do the same thing again. It can already, like, we're planning on getting Trick Room, and we can already pair it with Jugulis to set up Tailwind. So, you saw what I did with Clefable last season. I think it's an amazing Pokemon. So, and I even used it offensively in the finals. Now, it was brilliant there. So, yeah, I'm not afraid to use Clefable in that way, which I think is something that makes it even deadlier in my hands than some other players, just because I'm not afraid to use it offensively as a Fairy type, but I'm also just fine with it clicking Follow Me. It can do that all season, and it's paid for itself. Next up, similar theme, picking a Pokemon I used last season, and that is Salazzle. Now, again, not something I wanted to do, but when I was kind of rounding the team together, I just needed a Fire type, and trying to find a Fire type in my budget range really wasn't something I was able to find. Like a good one anyway, other than Salazzle. So Salazzle it was. Again, performed incredibly well for me last season, one of my favourite Pokemon to use last season. Extremely fast fake out. There's a couple faster fake outs now. Things like, although I don't know how many are in the Dawn division itself, but I know Canna has Weavile, so that is going to be, I believe, the fastest fake out in our division. But having, you know, the second fastest is still really good. That's good for, you know, 6 of my 7 matchups, which is great. Being immune to Taunt is nice, and then just, yeah, again, a Pokemon I used quite well, I think, last season. And gets, I think, a couple of extra tools due to it being Nacdex. Same with Clefable as well. Because Clefable is a Gen 1 Pokemon, I will be digging into this thing's move pool and finding what garbage I can make work. Because I will find something really dumb, and I will make it work. So that's all. Since it's Generation 7, doesn't have as much, but I think it has a couple extra pieces that can help it out in supporting the team. Really fast fake out, really good strong dual stab, Snarl, Breaking Swipe, Taunt, Encore, Acid Spray, but I think Acid Spray is probably not going to be useful unless I pair it with Jugulis, perhaps? Like, maybe maybe that could work? Not too sure, but I think, like I say, Salazzle did great for me last season, so I'm perfectly fine running it back. Now we are getting into the 2 Pokemon that kind of defined just this draft. I picked 2 Pokemon in the lower tiers that I wanted to build this team around, and this is going to be the first one. Petulant. So, I personally believe Petulant is not a bad Pokemon. This was only 7 points, and I think at 7 points it was kind of a steal. Why? Its stats are extremely good. Poison Ghost, actually a really solid typing defensively, and kind of can play a late game win condition. With Recover and being able to Toxic Stall and be super annoying in that super high defense stat, you can kind of make it so it can just win. But also with Nasty Plot, if you are able to set it up and put it in a fast mode or a slow mode, because 88 kind of can work in both depending on the matchup, I think that gives this thing enough utility to be useful. It has some supporting moves. It has a really shallow move. I will say that. It's very shallow. But it has a couple useful things that I think, if given the right opportunity, could actually make this Pokemon work. And that's what I kind of aimed for with this team, was giving opportunities to some of the lower tier Pokemon to function. Because it's all well and good having really good high tiers that you can bring every week, but you've got to bring your low tiers at some point, and at least having a team that can allow those Pokemon to function, I think, can really help. So that's what I was thinking with Petrarunt. Being able to Terror it again is great. So hopefully I get to use this Pokemon, decently well. I'm not sure how well it is actually going to perform, but I have faith in it to at least, win a game or two. And at such low point value, I felt like it was just pretty decent. So the other Pokemon, and this is one that I just think I'm going to be better at using than some people, because I think I understand it as a Pokemon, is my Mega of choice. I'm calling you out, Kanna, because when you made your list on the top 10 best Megas and the top 10 worst Megas for VGC, you put Mega Heracross at number 1, and you said it was definitive. So even though we had Mega Ordino and Mega Heracross at the same point value, you said it was the worst. And so I'm hopefully going to prove that it is not as bad as people think. Obviously the typing isn't great, the fact that it drops speed when it Megas isn't great, but it doesn't have to Mega turn 1, it can keep that 85 speed stat pre-Mega, which is really nice. And the bulk it gets is really nice. If it's not getting hit by a flying type move, it can take hits. Now, that's a big if, and, Pokemon can run Aerial Ace, but that's a move slot that they're wasting on Mega Heracross, this 6-point Pokemon. Pokemon that does not need to come to every week, but as something that can do extremely high damage with its, 185 attack. Like, I saw 185 attack in 6 points, and I went, yes. That's pretty much it. It's like, yeah, I can make this work. Good coverage as well, which is really nice. Thanks to the skill link, it gets access to Bullet Seed and Rock Blast, and then the Pin Missile, instead of having to rely on Mega Horn, which is great, as well as Close Combat. High Horsepower as well, and Knockoff. Just a lot of great moves, and even Trailblaze to increase its speed. It has options to do really, really, really strong damage, and kind of is my counterpart to UBM, where UBM is kind of my really, really strong special attacker. This is my kind of really, really strong physical attacker, and really the first physical attacker off the team. Very few physical Pokemon actually made it onto this team to kind of reduce the impact of Intimidate against my team. So, really excited to use Heracross, honestly. I think I can use this a lot better than some people. I'm not sure. I just feel like I'm able to kind of... Its EVs is going to be... It's going to be beauty. When you get to finally see those on my channel in about, like, 3 years, when I finally upload them, it will be a thing of beauty. Because I'm really excited to kind of mess around with this thing. So, yeah. Hopefully gets to use it well. Only other thing I'll mention is its speed stat as well. Kind of makes it a really solid Tail Room mon. It can be used in Tailwind, can be used in Trick Room, depending on the matchup, and I think that is really nice. Kind of what the team was going for. Next up, we need to finally get our Trick Room setter, and the one I settled on was quite a low tier one, but one I do not think is too bad, and that is regular Exeggutor. Now, while I would have liked Alolan Exeggutor, I did not want to double up on Dragon types, because I plan on picking up another Dragon type fairly soon. The Ice weaknesses are fairly high on this team as it is, and I didn't want to add, maybe even more, like another ×4 weakness, and an extra Fairy weakness. So, base Exeggutor it is. While I do agree that Alolan Exeggutor is much better, Base Executor gets the job done. With its decent bulk with 95, 85, 75, it can kind of get the job done. Harvests with citrus berries are really annoying at times. And then has decent coverage. Nothing crazy, but one thing that can't be ignored is Sleep Powder. Because if you're just giving it a turn to just click Sleep Powder, that's really annoying. And I think this alone could force some safety goggles. Because you can't really leave Executor sitting around if it's got Sleep Powder, because it's just going to put everything to sleep. And it's got 125 special attack, so even uninvested, it still does relatively good damage with its dual stab combination. So, yeah, really, really interested to see how Executor performs. I'm not sure how well it's going to perform on this team specifically, because sadly it is the only real Trick Room setter. There is technically another one coming up, but, you know, we'll see. I am excited to see how Executor does. I'm very interested to see what it can do, especially because there were a few lower tier grass types that I kind of saw and was very interested in. Both Executors and the Tangrowth line were both Pokemon I were very interested in. But actually I had a counter synergy with Tapu Koko that I was planning on using, and I was like, maybe that's a reason for me not to use Tapu Koko, because all of those Pokemon can use Sleep Powder, and I don't really want to counteract myself with the electric terrain. So this ends up kind of working out a little bit better in that sense. Even at the end of the day, if all it needs to do is set Trick Room, then it's good enough. Because I was afforded to pick a lower tier Trick Room setter that isn't as good, because I've got such a reliable way to set it up. So that was my idea. Going into the last few Pokemon though, I feel like it's fair to talk about this duo at the same time, because while I have used this duo in the past, it has not been for many a moon. And that is Gigalith and Dracovish. Excadrill is taking a hiatus from the Sand duo, or trio I suppose, that I love, and I do still love Excadrill. He is my son. But after what happened in Season 6, well, we don't talk about Season 6, okay? Anyway, so, yeah, I wanted another way to have speed control. Obviously I've got Trick Room, obviously I've got a really fast Tailwind, but having another way to have speed control just felt really nice. So, we've got Weather. The thing I also really wanted in general was kind of the slow mode, because my slow mode it was only at 52 with the Ursaluna. So having Gigalith here at 25 base speed makes it one of the slowest Pokemon that really has been drafted in this division, I think overall, because 25 speed is very slow. With the Sand giving it the special defense buff, it is very tanky, and with that 135 attack stat, it does a lot of damage, even with just a Stomping Tantrum plus Rock move coverage. On top of that, it gets some really nice supporting moves. The main notable one here is Wide Guard, which can be very, very nice against some teams. So, yeah, very excited to use Gigalith again. Again, a Pokemon I've used quite a few times, and has the options to run things like Iron Defense Body Press as well, which is very scary, and can be very detrimental against some teams. So I'm excited to use Gigalith as always. He's one of my favorite Pokemon, and the only Sand setter that didn't make it into bringing Gen 9. But it's also my favorite one. So glad that I get to use Gigalith once again. And then there's Dracovish. I want to click the funny fish button, because the last time I had Dracovish, it was actually more expensive, but really didn't perform for me. But even though people can defensively Terra Water Fishes Wrens are just gonna hurt. I don't care what anyone says. Terra Water Fishes Wrens are just gonna hurt. And with a Choice Band, or maybe Scarf Strongjaw, this is all it needs. It just needs Fishes Wren. Unless it's running a non-choice set in which it could run Protect, or maybe some others like moves like Substitute. For the most part, it's going to be clicking Fisher's Rend, because that's what Dracovish does. It's not always super fast with a Scarf. In fact, Scarf Dracovish gets outsped by Dragapult, very notably. But Sand kind of makes is a big difference maker, because you can still go Adamant and you're hitting 254 speed step? So, very, very fast. Faster than a lot of Pokemon with a Choice Scarf. So, yeah. Dracovish, gonna do the big damage, gonna click the funny fish button, and maybe, you know, some other moves like Once in a Blue Moon. Does not need many other things to do its thing. But yeah, nothing else to say about Dracovish. He's the funny clicking Vicious Rend button guy. And we'll see how many teams fall to that. Last but not least, I had a point left, so I settled on Bronzor. Not a very good Pokemon, but it can set Trick Room in a pinch, with the kind of options to have the Levitate or Heat Proof with an Eviolite can make it very bulky, and if it just needs to set Trick Room to let Ursaluna Blood Moon come in, then that's good enough. That's good enough for me. If Exeggutor really can't do it for whatever reason, then there is a backup if needs be. It is very bad, because it does negative damage, does not even get Body Press to do any damage. The best it's going to do is use Toxic, and look very silly doing so. Nothing crazy with Bronzor, just it was the 1-point Pokemon that I thought could most benefit the team as an extra way to set Trick Room if need be. So, that is going to be my team for Season 14 of UBL. I'm excited I'm excited to return, of course. I'm excited to have more very intense games, and see if I can, hold the title still. I'm also the reigning Natdex champion as well, because the last season of Natdex we did was Season 7, and I also won that, though that was a time in which I was nowhere near as dominant as I am now. I still think many people can take the crown, and I don't intend to let up at all. So, if you want the title, come and get it. But I'm not going to let it go without a fight. Let's have some good games this season. I'm looking forward to everyone I play. And I hope you enjoy the games and my commentary to go aside them. See you guys next time. Peace.